Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new edition of the Local Cafe number 88. Today, the main topic will be continuing building dashboards like we started last time. We also launched an interesting challenge for Dale that I'm sure he will speak about today. But before that, let's welcome the new people to this webinar. And just as a brief introduction, my name is Bogdan Litescu. I'm the founder and CEO of Plantanet. And this is something that we do every Wednesday for the community. We get together to showcase new features in the product or speak about cases that we find on our support channels, on the community portal, or actually build a hands-on session where we build systems like we've started again last week, a new series about building dashboards, and we are continuing today. This event is being recorded, and all past recordings you can find on our YouTube channels. There's already 87 hours of very good training videos. So make sure to visit, subscribe. We'll have the links in the chat in a bit. So the agenda for today, I will give you a brief product roadmap update, and then we'll move to Dale Warner, our head of support, to give us both stories from the trenches on our support channels, community forums, and he will continue with extending the system that Patrick started last week, the dashboard system. Okay, without further ado, I know that everybody's waiting for 120 to get out. Initially, we postponed it once already. We planned for this Monday, but we got very good feedback from the community. In total, we had 30 items reported during the beta program. So thanks a lot, guys, for submitting this. It really helped us achieve a more stable release and make the job easier for Dale on the support channel as well. Right now, where we're at, we are doing the first release candidate today. So we cover many angles that were pointed out during this phase. And tomorrow we'll heavily test the release candidate, and if everything goes well, by the end of the day, we will release it officially. There are still a couple of more items that we are aware of. We'll just mark them as known issues, and we'll follow up with hotfixes, especially items that are not critical. They don't affect major functionality. So we are all eager to get this release out. It's one of the biggest releases we ever did, as we touched everything that was UI related for the end user. Overall, what we've heard so far is that everything looks much more modern, much cleaner. It's Bootstrap 5, and also we've updated the backend code that supports the frontend as well, or the JavaScript libraries. For example, the listing moved completely to Angular. So what you'll notice when you start 120 is that everything is much faster. I think that will be a good experience for users of the system. Okay, so thanks again, everyone, for contributing to this release. And now let's move on to Dale to give us the hands-on session.
All right, good morning. A few topics we did we've been covering that we do hotfixes, and previous to today, we have released 10. There's 2 new available this week. So we've corrected a bug with search where category filters weren't working when you had more than one checkbox. And so that's resolved. Also, in automation, there's been a kind of a long-standing problem, and this was resolved where a database insert trigger didn't fire consistently. If you use that kind of trigger, sometimes it works, sometimes it didn't, and I know that that's was certainly a reliability issue, and we're glad to have that one resolved. So that's 2 new hotfixes that are available. And again, these are available as hotfixes in 119, but coming forward into 120, you'll get these things automatically. You get all the, our new release is cumulative of all of those. Beyond that, I wanted to mention kind of our plans for Low Code Cafe episodes. Last week we did part 1. This week we're doing part 2 of adding a dashboard. And I think we have enough content to do a part 3. So the plan is that next week we'll do a part 3. And I'll probably do that, but I haven't gotten, we haven't nailed that down yet. And we'll probably move on to doing system status reporting. Also like to encourage you to engage in our campfire. That's a Low Code Campfire happens Friday the same hour. We don't have a definite topic, but we will be talking around the table with a bunch of low code enthusiasts. And I see many of you are here today. So thank you for investing in both webinars. That's more of a meeting format, so you get a chance to participate more directly. While I'm thinking about it, let's put some links on the board here for this episode. So this is an opportunity. Let's see. Yep, there it goes. So you can register in advance for the Low Code Campfire. There's a link to our YouTube channel, our community portal, which is a great resource for getting your questions answered and for helping the community by answering questions. You can also participate in the beta program over there or submit your feature requests. We have a webinar feedback form. Tell us what you think about this webinar. And finally, today, I'm going to be working some with really quite a bit with Chart.js, and I hope that that's interesting. We've touched on Chart.js before, but I wanted to provide the link, and we'll be working directly from there. So hopefully you'll get to see adding a chart to an application from the ground up. Pretty simple to do. So that's it from the trenches. And now I'll put on my low coding hat and we'll just go right into got data at a dashboard part 2. So the things that we're going to cover today, first the challenge, why did we build this as a separate app, but also that we'll work on mostly on adding charts, but we may go and get some data from other systems, and then that system status is probably going to get rolled over into next week. But so attacking the question, why did we do it as a separate app? Our intention was that this health check app is going to be a central point for monitoring applications and health, both key statistics and the health of those systems, and that'll be for many systems. So building a single point, a single app that's going to monitor many apps. I think Bogdan mentioned last week we have 20 odd apps that are going on to support Plantain app overall. And there's more than that, but those are the external facing ones, a lot of them. So that's one reason that it doesn't really belong in any one app. It's a central thing. And then just on kind of the overall philosophy of not creating a monolith. So we could add statistics to the community where we were working last week to the community portal app, but then that would be then connected with and just adding to the overall size and scope of community. And then if you wanted to do statistics for another system, then you would be adding to that. So by pulling that piece, statistics, out and bringing it into a central place, it allows it to be a system on its own and not to grow forever the monolith. So that, I don't know that that was that much of a cliffhanger, but that's where we left off last week. So the focus today is going to be about adding charts. And as I said, we'll get some data from other systems. And with that, I'm just going to dive right into adding charts. So the first thing that we're going to do is create a page specifically to hold these charts and the things about community. And so the idea is that we'll have an at-a-glance section of our website that will have a community page. We'll probably add other pages as we go along. We're going to make that visible to all users. We will copy our existing dashboard from the place where it lives. We want this to be visible to everybody, so we're going to test it out in Incognito, see what issues we run into, and if we need to add some permissions. From there, we'll go on to adding charts. So I'll flip back to this when we get to that next stage, but let's see where we left off. This was the end of last episode. We had built, there was a standard entity called Community Stats that has all our statistics. And if we sort this, we'll see that it's been running daily. So even today, there's been 2 questions out on the community forum, but no feature requests. Yesterday, there was 1. And so we had this standard entity that was collecting this data and automatically doing that. You can see that in the last episode. From that, we configured a couple of, these so far 8 dashboard tiles. The questions, 2 questions, so the number of questions today, the number of questions in the last 7 days, questions per day, the most questions in a day in these last 7 days. So those were the statistics for questions. And then for feature requests, very similar statistics over 7 days. How many feature requests today, how many in the last 7 days. Let's see. Yep, I misread this. There was 0 yesterday. So that statistic is correct. Features requests per day. So not seeing a lot of activity right now in those, but those are the statistics that we collected. So that's where we left off last week. What I'm hoping to do today again is that we'll create this at a glance page. And and then probably eventually community stats, this raw page will go away. But let's see if we can build the at a glance community page. So this is the idea. We're building just a custom page. So we'll go to pages, page to the site root, and it's going to be called at. We're going to give all users the ability to view that, and we're going to give our developer type users the ability to edit the page, and it will be visible in the menu. So we'll say yes to that. And it's now I filtered for that from the site root so I can go down into it, and I'm going to create a new page for community. In the same way, this is going to be all users and developer user types. So this gives us the community, the page. If we go back to our the front of the site and refresh, we now should see an at a glance added to the menu, and we can go to community. So we have a nice blank slate here, and we're going to start building it. What I want to have is that same dashboard, the statistics, but we don't need the raw data, and that's the reason I'm going down this path. So one way to get that raw data over here, we could add a new dashboard, excuse me, to get the dashboard over here, we could add a new dashboard and configure it. But another far easier way is to just add an instance of it here. So I'm going to add an existing module from our community stats page. And I don't want to make, I want to have a exact, I want to keep it's actually going to be the exact same instance of it. So I don't want to copy, I don't want an empty one. I want instance of the one that's already there. So we'll grab that dashboard and drop it on the page. And so we get our same thing. This way, if we configure the dashboard in either place, it will show up in both places. We've got an .NET Nuke adds these extra edits, and I don't really need one, so I'm going to delete that out. These HTML module that by default that I don't need. So we've got our dashboard on, and so the next thing is again going back to our list. We've added an instance in the dashboard. Let's take a look at that incognito. So if we take this same URL and look at it in an incognito session, we get this nice error that says that the current user doesn't have permissions to read the entity. So that is simply this. If we go to entities and take a look at community stat and edit it, look at permissions, all the permission to look at this, users have no rights and all users have no rights, and so easily fixed. We want to allow all users to view all entries, and so we'll make that permission change and save. So now we go and do the same thing. First of all, as a user here, it hasn't impacted our ability to see this, but we go and view the page incognito. Now it happily will tell us the statistics. So now anybody can take a look at our community statistics. And if we just, for example, browse to the root, we can see probably need to make the homepage permissions different. I didn't do that, so we'll worry about that at a later time. So this positions us to now go on. We've got a blank slate. We can view the page incognito. We've done permissions. So now I want to add a generic chart. Add a chart. What I want to chart is this same health check data that we've been looking at before. I want, for example, to show questions per day. So if I were to focus in on questions and each day, and let's say I want a nice line graph, questions per day. That's the target. That's where we're going. Let's see how to get there. So in our community page, I'm going to have it appear right here. And the way I'm going to do it is through the use of an action form. The action form is going to allow us to collect the data that we need. Plus, it's just a nice receptacle, a nice easy way to do chart.js. So we'll put an action form on the page, and we'll configure that in a minute. I'm not going to, well, let's go ahead and get started. So we'll say we'll manage the form, and we want a blank slate. So we'll choose the blank form option. And this is going to be the community chart. I like to name, as everyone who's attended before, I like to name my forms and things so that it makes sense when you're looking for them. This is going to be, defaults to Bootstrap 5 because we're in the new release of 20, the beta release. And so we'll save it just that much. Chart.js, which I put the link on the screen, just a nice open source kind of charting module. If you go to chartjs.org and click Get Started, you can go right to the page that I'm going to be working from today. There is a Getting Started page. I mean, there's lots of good stuff to read, but if you go to this Getting Started page, this shows you the components that you need to make chart.js work. One thing is that you need a canvas. That's where the chart is going to appear. You need to bring in the chart.js script, the source. So then there's the scripting to configure a chart, to create a chart, and then finally one to actually create the chart. So these four components will get it done. And so we're going to put these. If you had an HTML module, you could put this stuff on there and do it as well. This is just straightforward scripting. But we're going to take each one of these pieces and put it into a static text in the community chart. And we're just going to implement their chart, very straightforward. So the content here is we're going to, we've got the first one, the canvas. We'll take the second one, which is to go out and get the chart.js from the CDN. We're going to take this next one that configures a chart that it's actually this one that we see down here. They're showing it January, February, March, April, this line chart. And so it has data, it has labels. It's not the information we want, but it's going to serve as a nice template. And then finally, this generating script here, where you say that you want a new chart. And since we're going to do this in just one step, we don't actually need to close the script and open it again. And I think it doesn't work anyway for reasons beyond my technical ability. So we end up with this chart. It's got a canvas, it's got the chart.js, it's got labels, it's got data 0, 10, 5, 2. It's got it's going to say it's a line chart, and this generates it. So we've just copied and pasted from chart.js. And with that, I am going to save and form. And so we scroll down and we can see we've got our data set. We also see we've got a message about Bootstrap 5. This is one of these things that's because it's intermediate here. We haven't fully released everything. This has not defaulted to Bootstrap 5, so we'll switch the page to Bootstrap 5. So it's loaded, and let's see if that now makes that message go away. Yep, so we've got our nice chart. We still keep our dashboard elements. Kind of big on the screen, so I will make some adjustments. I'm going to open the manage screen in a new tab so we can get back and forth to it very easily. But on the layout, I'm going to change this to something more like 6 wide. So it'll appear in the center of the screen, and refresh so we can see what that looks like. Okay, so now we have our nice basic chart. Not our data, but at least we've proved that chart.js can be implemented pretty quickly. So now the question, getting our data associated with it, and let's see where we are. So we've added a generic chart, and I had one more note here to load the script as a static file, so we'll do that too. In our field, the static text, and I'm actually going to rename this as it'll make it easy to find it. This is going to be the questions per day chart. We might have multiple charts on the form, and to avoid conflict, this really only needs to be loaded once per page, not once per chart. So I am going to copy this out, and then instead of loading it here, we can create an event in the on-page load. We can say load static files, and so this is going to be load page, and so we'll put that URL here instead. And so this is going to, this small change, it's just a nice clean way to work. So we'll save that, refresh, make sure we didn't break anything, and the chart still loads. So it's still getting loaded, but it's only being loaded once per page. Good. So that's our generic chart is now done and configured quite nicely. So the next problem is, how do we get our questions per day? That's our whole point. So we've got to get the data that we want to chart, and then we want to update the script so that we can connect the data. So let's take a look at that. If the data that we're getting, let's go back to our community stats. I'm going to open that in a new tab here. So we've got our community stats, and we're going to be focusing on the entity of type question and the statistic of type daily. And so let's do a little SQL to get the data that we want. So we'll use the SQL console. Do I not have this activated here? So I'm going to turn it on. SQL console makes it available here. So this is just going to let us query our data a little bit. And so the data that we want is coming from the community stat entity. I'm going to copy that. So this is just a process that I use to try to see what the data is, what we want to plot out. This gives us all the fields from this table, and really we only need a couple of them. We're going to want this ID just to keep track of where we are. It's got an as of date, and then we're going to want the value. So those are the fields that we're going to focus in on. So we'll take, instead of everything, we only want E and as of, and the value. And so we can run that again. And this is showing us everything. We haven't filtered it out though. If you refer to last week's episode, you can see that. You can see the filtering that we applied, but it is where entity equals 1 and statistic equals 1, which is the questions and daily. So we run that, and now we can see all the statistics. We might want to put this in order too, so probably in order by as of. And so at least these will be then automatically ascending. So we have the dates from the 2nd to the 13th, all the questions listed out here. So this gets us the data that we want. And there's a trick in recent SQL Server versions that you can do. You can say for JSON path, and it returns a JSON result. And the idea behind this is that chart.js is the data that we want, it's going to be real easy to get to it by JSON. So even though we're selecting SQL, it's just really easier for us to consume it as a JSON path. So this is the data that we want, and you can see it has as of date 4.2 and a value of 2, as of date 4.3, a value of 4. So we see all our data here. So having developed this, and by the way, if you're not familiar with SQL console, I'll point out too, you can save this query. So maybe I'll save this as a model. And it just makes it where we can recall that by selecting this dropdown. If we want to come back to it later, it's saved. We don't need it, but I'm just pointing out the feature, the ability to save a query. So we have our ability to acquire the data. And so we're going to go back to our at a glance page and the community chart, and we're going to go out and get that data. So this is going to be done by way of running a SQL query. The SQL query we just developed it, and so this is copy paste here to keep myself sane. Get the community chart JSON stat. So we're going to store this result in community chart JSON. So that JSON is going to go to this element on this context item, and we'll be able to draw from that. And that's really all we need to do there. So we've got some data, and I'll just refresh to show we didn't break anything, but we also didn't put any data on the screen. We're still doing our old data set. One of the steps that I like to do is to display data, at least during development. So I'm going to do that. We'll add another static text, and this is going to be the and community chart JSON. So this will put an element on the screen that's going to show us our data, and it's going to have that little comment on it. So if we go back and refresh again, we now see the data is and our ID. So we're proving that the data is getting acquired correctly, and this is the data that we want to do. All right, so we have gotten the data. Now we've got to get the data into the chart. And so we got the data chart. What we'll do now is we need to modify the script to connect that. And by the way, I'm not going to take full credit for this. If you go to our YouTube channel and search for chart.js, you'll see Radu has done a lot of done this work in the past, and you worked with chart.js. But so I'm borrowing some from him in that I am not a JS expert. So the first, in order to connect that chart, community chart JSON into our script here, first thing we do is we'll create a variable to receive it. And so that will be chart data. And then we're just going to set that equal to, I'm going to paste this value because I've got it on the board. JSON. So this gets the data into our JavaScript here, and then there is a nice formula that Radu showed in that other one, where you can take the values that you have in an array. This whole thing is an array, and if we want to pull out all the label values, for example, which would be the as ofs, and call them as a label, there's a function that returns that as an array. And so we're going to take advantage of that. So we're going to create a variable called labels, going to be equal to, it's going to come from chart. And the function is called map. And for each of those, it's going to return a So it's taking the as of and putting it every value of as of in the same order that they're in an array, and putting it into something called labels. And if we were to write this to the write it to the console log or show it as an alert, we can see what we're going to get back out of it. So I'm going to save that and refresh, and we get we don't get an alert because I broke it. Thank you all for your help. See, you're paying attention. It needs to be in the script area. I was just throwing that out in the middle of nowhere. So my demo bug for today. So it's now inside the script. We're running it. Let's see if that works. Thank you, Ben. Still not working.
Maybe try another refresh there. Maybe it was not saved yet. No. Okay.
So, but I see that the working syntax actually didn't have a semicolon after it, which is interesting. So I'm going to try that. And that's not it. So now I'm just going to copy and paste because I'll hold this up too long. And excellent. So just so you know, I've done this 3 times in preparation for this, and it's that it doesn't work. It's crazy. But let's make sure I've got my other part right here. Do this, check out chart data, make sure we have a good result there. No, so something's breaking in that.
Yeah. Can you scroll at the bottom to make sure that everything is properly closed? And if not, maybe we can also look at the code on the page at the console to see if there's an error.
Yep. So I think what I'll do, we'll verify that everything's connected just by let's clean it up. We'll get rid of my changes, and now it refreshes properly, so it's at least the script is not broken. Let's try again. The questions per day is community chart JSON. I'm going to put that on the clipboard just to make sure I get that right. And
Needs to be a string. It will error that alert. The starting one, yeah. Make it a string. Yep. Works now.
well, it's okay. Good. All right. I don't know where I went wrong yet. But I'm going to go ahead and get my labels, and I'm going to just copy this from preparation. And I've broken it again. Really cheap now.
Maybe open the console here to see. Probably it's a JavaScript error that's causing it.
Sure.
Labels has already been declared.
Ah. So my problem was thinking. My problem was trying to do it in intermediate steps. So I'm going to call this chart labels. Yep, and there it is here. Labels was already declared. So let's see if we get a better answer now. All right, so now my alert works and it shows me all of the labels 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, all the way to 4.13. So thank you for the help. Sorry for sending us in a sideways here. So what we've proven here is that chart labels has worked well, and then I did the same thing here for value data, pulling the E value out. And so just again, one more time to illustrate that we're pulling the right values out, we can now see 2, 4, 16, 10, 1, 3. So it's created a nice list of information that we need. And so now it's just a question of, now that we have chart labels and value data, it's a question of using those in the right place in the script. So instead of using the labels that came with the default script labels, I'm going to get rid of that, and we'll use chart labels for our labels. And then let's find the place too that where we put the value data in. So they previously had hard-coded the data into this element here, and instead we're going to provide value data. So it's simply inserting those two things in there. And so we save and refresh. And so now we have our data going across the bottom. We have all of our labels. So each one per day with the line chart showing where it should be. Easy, right? If you just get the JavaScript right. So so now we have really hit our objective. We have our chart of questions per day. It says my first data set. So that's probably something we can clean up. If we look in the setup for this, the label of this thing is my first data set. And so we could say questions per day as the label of overall. We could also follow along chart.js and work with the other options to find, for example, colors and things like that. You might want to pick a different color, but now we refresh and we get questions per day. So I found a couple of neat things that you can do with this. You might not want to see this as a line chart. So if we go back to, perhaps we want to have it as a bar chart or in a different orientation. And this is really a pretty easy and interesting thing to look at. The place where it says what we want to do is here. It's called, the type is line. And so if we put bar here, again, this is chart.js options, and save it and refresh, instead of that, you get a nice bar chart. There's another option within this that is, you can specify additional options. And again, I'm going to do this in the copy and paste style, but there's an option that's available called index access, and it can be either X or Y. And so if I change this, we now have a bar chart that is on the Y-axis for our label. So if that's the style that you wanted, and then just the axis is swap here. So interesting way that you can implement this in Plantain app is to use these as parameters. So if we, and I'm going to take a brief detour here back to our tokens and take a look at our core tokens. There's some tokens to get information off the URL, the query string, and one of them is get or cookie, which says that it gets the query string item back. You can get or choose what value name that you want to return, and if it's provided in the query string, it will put it in a cookie and make it available for you to use. It's a two-step thing. But if it's not in the query string, it'll go out and get it in the cookie from the last time. So this is a nice way to let the user configure the grid, and it'll be the same for them every time they go look at least on that device. So we can take advantage of this by saying that we want to do a get or cookie. And the name of what we're going to do is the community type. And then we're also going to provide a default value of line. So it's going to come up as a line chart originally, but then it's going to be stored. You can overwrite it to be a bar chart by just using community chart type in the same way. And we'll do this all at once here. We'll do community chart axis. I'm sorry, this is going to be the get community chart axis, and we're going to make it equal to y. Now we'll make it to x. And so you'll also be able to specify community chart axis, and but it'll default to x. So let's see what that looks like. If we save that and refresh, we get it goes back to our line chart because that's the default. But now we can override and say that we want a chart type equals bar, or any of the other types that it's supported by chart.js. And in the same way, we can say that we want a chart axis y. And so now it'll flip to that. And so just with a couple, so now you can send people here with a different URL and dramatically affect the way the chart is rendered. Or we could add some buttons, and that's probably what we'll have time left to do today, is add buttons for this option selection. So let's back on our, we'll create a button called, this is a standard, and I'm going to actually do this as a link so it doesn't take up a bunch of room. And when they click it, we're going to redirect it and send them to community chart type equals bar. So this will flip it to, and I'll also send the other one as well. Equals x, that's the nice standard layout. But then that's the standard bar chart. We can clone that, and we'll do on left bar chart. We can find better names than I. And since it's cloned, all this stuff is here. It's still a bar chart, but we're going to change it to y. So we'll save that, take a look at it. So now we've got these links down here at the bottom, not well positioned, but we can do a standard bar chart, and it goes that way. Dates on left bar chart go that way. And we'll do one more and clean it up here. So if we clone this, and we'll call this the standard line chart. And this is going to be line, and save. And then we'll clean up a little bit on our layout here. This will be the standard bar chart, dates on left bar chart. Just put these links right underneath the layout of the chart. Again, you can do a much better job than I. So we have our now our standard line chart that we can flip to on left. And again, because we've used cookie, if we just come to this URL on this page as a returning user, it's going to take whatever our selections were. And this is easily seen if we look in the inspect and go to application and look at the cookies. You can see community chart access is Y, community chart type is bar. So these cookies are stored on your system and are provided automatically. If we take the same URL and go back to our incognito view, it's going to take the default for that, because since in that context there are no cookies, it's incognito. We're getting these default values, which is bar on the x-axis. So lets every user have their own view of this information, and stores it away. There are a ton, if you dive into chart.js, there's a ton of different chart types that are available, and you can expand on these ideas to get different types, different colors. If you take a look around their site, there's bubble charts and line charts. You can have multiple data sets, and so you just add on. So for example, it would be easy enough to plot both feature requests and questions per day in the same graph, maybe on different lines or different color items, but 2 per day or stacked chart. Lots and lots of variations that are available. And then probably my final act of cleanup here would be that questions per day data was never really needed. It was just something that made sure that we had the data so we can delete it out. And so now our at a glance for community shows the chart and some options to change the chart. Okay, with that, I hope that that you enjoyed my squirming as I had a JavaScript error. And Bogdan, did I leave any big questions unanswered?
No, I think since we have a couple of minutes, maybe one field that I think is not that popular is the button group. That would make your buttons much nicer.
Great. Now I'm going to learn something. So this is is it a field type?
Yes. So add a field type and choose button group under buttons. Yep. So what basically what this does, it lets you group buttons, so you don't have to size them, because if you size them, of course, they will always look ugly. So now you can keep adding buttons and select all the 3 links. And now maybe go to layout mode, and let's also center this to be the same size as the chart. Yes. Oh, okay. Oh, for some reason, yeah, for some reason.
I didn't get it saved. So group, and this is going to be called settings, and back in. So before I work on formatting it, let's just see if it comes in.
Oh yeah. So it's much nicer because it's evenly spaced out. Whereas if you do fixed size, of course, it depends on the length of the text inside, how much space is between all of them.
Good. All right. I wasn't aware of that one. I never used it. There are features. This product surprises me. It's been, I think that's what you get from having it been be a mature product, 10 years old, lots and lots of things added. And if you don't read or try all of them, there's more to see. So good. All right.
So do you already have a plan for us for next week?
Yeah, we really had intended to, what we're going to do with the health check as a final application is to both bring in key statistics from other systems and show a list of uptime system status. So for example, we'd be able to show that the console is operating normally, the community is operating normally, the service desk, all of our applications listed on a screen. So the goal would be that we'll grab data from more systems and show that as a overall status. And again, since Patrick is coming off a week off, I think I'll probably be presenting and hopefully do it with a little bit more grace than today.
If I can add one more to the wish list, a common thing that pops up is ability to drill down inside the data, right? So the ability to see which are those two questions that were open today. So that's usually it's a nice addition to the to dashboards. And nowadays, I see the business requirements evolving to having actionable dashboards. Because dashboards you can do in any BI software, but actionable dashboards it's very difficult to do. So then the ability to act on the data right inside this drill down, for example.
Perfect. I think if it's on your wish list, I suspect we'll deliver it next week.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you all for attending, and we will look forward to seeing you hopefully at Low Code Campfire, but if not, the next episode of Low Code Cafe next Wednesday.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.